Hi everybody, welcome to the Psychology Preview here at Bede. My name is Abby College and I'm one of the psychology teachers here. Just a little reminder, don't forget to ask any questions in the Q&A box if you submit your questions in there, and then I can answer any that come through at the end. So I'm just going to give you a little overview about myself, about the course, just to give you some extra information to help you hopefully make the right decision with regards to which course you'd like to study here in September. So, as I said, my name is Abby College. I've taught for 8 years now, 5 of which I've spent here at Bede. I have a first class honours degree from Northumbria in psychology. And the reason why I think psychology is one of the best subjects that you can study is because of the variety of the different topics that we study, and also because it links in so much with everyday life. We have a lot of students that say they really enjoy psychology because they can go home, they can speak to their family members about it, their friends about it, they can watch something on television that relates to the subject, and it really does fit into so many different parts of life because it's essentially the study of human behaviour. So the one thing to obviously mention with psychology is that it is a science, which is good for those of you that are maybe wanting to go and do a subject at university that requires you to have a science A-level. A lot of universities will accept psychology as a science. The reason why it's a science is because we have a biopsychology unit within psychology. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of the other different topics that we study on the course. So firstly, in year 12, we start with a topic called research methods. Research methods is basically the bare bones of psychology. How do you actually conduct a study within psychology? Alongside that, we do a topic called approaches. So this is where we look at 6 different viewpoints within psychology. We will try to explain a behaviour, and we will try to explain that behaviour using lots of different viewpoints. You may have heard of something called the nature-nurture debate before. On one side of the debate, you've got the nature debate, which will be something called the biological approach that would say all behaviour is genetic, for example. So for the likes of depression, it's to do with a gene that you've inherited or an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, what we call neurotransmitters. On the other side of that, you would have the behaviourist approach, which will be very much nurture on the nature-nurture debate. And that would say that all of your behaviour is learned, that you are born what we call a blank slate. So that's what we look at within the topic of approaches. We look at different behaviours and how they can be explained from lots of different viewpoints. We then go on, as I previously mentioned, to do a topic called biopsychology. So when I'm talking about psychology being a science, I'm not talking about chemistry or physics, I'm talking about biology. The reason being is we look at different parts of the brain and how that relates to human behaviour. We look at neurochemistry, different neurotransmitters in the brain and how they link to certain disorders. And that topic we study in year 1 and then also in year 2 with a bit of extra information. The next topic that we study in year 12 is psychopathology. So psychopathology is the study of mental disorders. There are tons of mental disorders out there, but the ones that we specifically look at on the specification in year 1 is depression, OCD and phobias. And for each of those, we look at the symptoms of them, so something called the characteristics. We look at the explanations of them. So for depression, we try and explain depression using something called the cognitive approach, which is to do with irrational and negative thinking. We look at the biological explanation for obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, which is where we look at how different levels of neurotransmitters in the brain can cause a disorder or the inheritance of certain genes. And then we also look at phobias, which we try to explain using the behaviourist approach, which says that we learn through a negative experience in our life that then causes us to have this phobia. We also look at the treatments of these disorders. So for phobias, we do the behavioural treatments of them. For OCD, we do the biological treatments like drug therapy. And for depression, we do the cognitive treatments such as cognitive behavioural therapy. So that's the psychopathology topic. We then move on and we do paper 1, which is social influence, our first topic of that. So social influence is all to do with why do people behave the way they do within society, essentially. So it's split up into conformity and obedience. So conformity, we look at the different types of conformity, the explanations of conformity. Conformity is where people change their behaviour because they want to fit in with the majority of other people. We also look at why do some people not want to conform? Why do some people actively want to stand out from the crowd? We look at some famous studies there that you may have heard of before, Ash, Zimbardo, Milgram, some very famous pieces of research in psychology. And then we move on and look at obedience. So that's where Milgram's study of obedience comes in. Why do we obey an authority figure, but we don't obey somebody that seems to have little power over us? So we look at the explanations of obedience. Again, why do some people not obey? And then the final thing we do within that topic is something called minority influence, which is where we look at how a small group of people can campaign, and they can actually change, and they can overcome the majority's viewpoint and get other people to take on their viewpoint. So, for example, recycling, civil rights movement, etc. We look at all of that. The last two topics are attachment and memory. This is all just in year one. So you can see how there's a variety of different topics. No one topic is the same as the other. There's 7 different ones. They're each worth the same amount of topics in marks in the exam, which is 24 marks. I'll mention the exam in 1 second. So attachment, as the kind of name of the topic says, is the study of how the relationships you form as a child affect you when you're older, or if you don't form successful relationships as a child, how that can influence you or impact you when you're older. So we look at lots of different things within attachment. We look at caregiver-infant interaction. We look at the role of the father. We look at explanations for attachment. So how is it or why is it that you form an attachment? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it a learnt behaviour? Is it an innate behaviour? We then look at what happens, as I say, when you don't form those attachments and you've suffered what's called deprivation. We look at an extreme version of that, which is called institutionalisation, where we specifically look at Romanian orphanages and the effects that living in these institutions have on the children. And the final part of the course is where we look at something called the different types of attachment. So something called the strange situation is used, which assesses a child's behaviour and determines the type of attachment they are said to have. And the final element of it is that we look at how the relationships that you have as a child can actually influence how you are in your friendships, how you are in your romantic relationships, and even how you are as a parent. It's something called the continuity hypothesis. Last but not least, we do memory, which is an area of what we call cognitive psychology. So within memory, we start off by looking at different models of memory. So how do we explain how our memory works, our short-term memory, long-term memory. We then move on and have a look at the explanations for forgetting. So how is it that we forget memories, where we do a theory called retrieval failure and interference. And then the final part of the memory topic is on eyewitness testimony. So this is where we look at different factors that affect the accuracy of an eyewitness testimony. This is where somebody gives an account of an event that they've just witnessed. And we look at something called misleading information, and for example, leading questions that the police force are trained now not to use. And we also look at the effect of anxiety on recall of eyewitness testimony. The final thing within memory is something called the cognitive interview that police force is now trained to use in order to get better information, more accurate information from witnesses after an event. So that's how psychology can be applied to the real world. In year 13, we do all of the topics, you need all the information from year 1, but then we do some extra information in year 13 as well, some extra topics. So we look specifically at schizophrenia, and then you will do a topic called forensic psychology, cognition and development, and you will also do other topics, more research methods, more biopsychology as well in there also. So we look at a bit more depth, one specific mental disorder, which is schizophrenia, in the second year. So that's a bit of an overview about the actual content. As you can see, it's very varied. Every topic is different. The way that they're examined, the way that you're assessed within psychology is it's purely exam based. There's no coursework. So in year 1, in year 12, you will do 2 90-minute exams at the end of the first year. On that exam, it can be a total range of 1 mark multiple choice questions up to a 12-mark essay. And then in the second year, you will have 3 2-hour exams. And again, you could get a 1 mark multiple choice right up to a 16-mark essay in year 2. Every topic is worth 24 marks in the exam. Research methods is a really big area on the exam because it's actually worth 33% of your marks across all of the papers. So that really is a very big thing for you to focus on throughout the course. In terms of where psychology can take you and why you would study psychology, it will link in with absolutely everything, essentially any job, any area that you want to go into, because it is essentially the study of human behaviour, and like it or not, you will have to work with humans. So because of that, I would say there's not one area that it would necessarily lead into. You could go into psychology, and you could become a clinical psychologist, an educational psychologist, a psychology teacher like myself. You could go into teaching, you could go into the NHS, nursing, midwifery. It can open up so many different doors for you. There isn't one set psychology student. I've had students that have studied music tech, psychology, maths, had people that have studied psychology, biology and chemistry. There's literally no one size fits all for this subject. So if it's something that interests you, then I would say choose it. You don't have to choose it alongside any other subject whatsoever. Destinations wise, we've had students, it's usually a very popular subject that students choose to do at university. Over the years, we've had students go to Teesside, Northumbria, Newcastle, UCL, which is the University of London. And in terms of equipment and resources that you need for this course, really, you don't actually need anything as such apart from a willingness to work very hard, have an open mind, and be an analytical person. So if you're very good at picking out strengths and weaknesses of things, if you don't like to take things on face value, then that would be a really good skill for you to have within psychology. We also say that it's kind of an all-rounder subject in the sense that you need strong maths, English and science skills. 10% of the marks are awarded for maths in the exam, but when we mean maths, we're not talking like algebra, we're talking about more interpreting data. So you might be asked to do things like draw a graph, interpret a graph, you may be asked to interpret a table of results, you might be asked to calculate some percentages. It's nothing overly complicated that you wouldn't have done at GCSE maths in that respect. So I think that's everything from me. And I hope that I look forward to meeting some of you in September.